Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start by saying I will never cease to be amazed by the way that God works. So the pastor called me, it's probably been a few weeks ago now, and asked if I could fill in for him today. I said, yeah, I've been kind of working on a sermon, should be ready by then. And he said, okay, thanks. So then I show up today after writing the sermon, or being given the sermon, and Linda's program ties into it, and Sabbath school was all about it, and so everything just kind of ties in today. I don't know about you guys, but I spend an awful lot of time in this aisle here. Sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, depending on what we decide we're going to be cooking and how fresh we want it to be. But not long ago, as I was standing in this aisle, I kind of stood there and I was sorting through the mounds of the peppers and the apples and oranges and all this stuff. And as I'm doing that, I'm picking through and I'm passing over pieces that are broken and bruised or sunburned or smashed or somehow otherwise unworthy in my eyes for me to take home just to eat. But can you guys imagine if that had been Jesus' attitude when he came to earth? People of the world who are broken, bruised, crushed, passed over, beaten down, are exactly the people that Jesus sought to heal and to save and to spread the love of God to. And we can all say amen to that because there's not a person in this room who could meet that criteria of the perfect piece of fruit if that was what Jesus had been looking for. This made me question, do I see people as Jesus does? Or when I look to share the gospel message or just to witness to somebody, does the recipient have to meet my criteria? In truth, we all share the same sinful condition. Some people just cover it up better, and so they look better on the outside. In Isaiah 1, 4, and 6, Israel is described as a sinful nation, laden with sin and iniquity from the sole of the foot even to the head. There is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. They've not been closed or bound up or soothed with ointment. This passage perfectly presents the state that we are all in absent Jesus. Beth blessed us a few weeks ago when she broke down Psalm 23 in her children's story, when we all learned that the shepherd would anoint his sheep with oil to cleanse those wounds and begin the healing process. Our shepherd is Jesus, and without him, we're all bruised and broken and infected with sin. Without him and his anointing us, those wounds can't even begin to heal. More good news comes from us in that verse that everyone knows so well, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's the news that we are to share with everyone. The world, however, tends to put up barriers for us, things that prevent us from reaching those that need God the most. Some of these barriers are easy to recognize. Distance from civilization as we know it, and hostile governments are a few, but some you don't realize are there until you're standing in the produce aisle picking out your fruit. Has anybody in here ever heard of Ben Malcolmson? No? Okay, I kind of figured that because I hadn't either until I got his book. How about Pete Carroll? Anybody familiar with that name? Okay, a few sports fans in here. That's good. So Ben Malcolmson has a book out right now called Walk On that just kind of really showed me how God can act in your life even when you don't see him working. So Ben Malcolmson wrote this book. He was a newspaper reporter at USC for their school newspaper when he was a student there. And he thought that USC had this really unique thing that they did in the springtime. They would let walk-on players come and try out for the USC football team. And in his own life, he had only played football really one time, and it was Pee Wee football. And he got about 3 games into the season and decided he didn't want to play anymore, but his dad made him finish anyways. So he decides he wants to get this great story for the USC newspaper. He's going to go through and he's going to do this walk-on tryout. Now here he is, like 5'10", 165 pounds. He's going to go try and play football for USC. So he goes and he tries out, and lo and behold, he makes the team, which surprised him more than it surprised anybody else. So as he's there and he finds out he's made the team, he gets on, and they start running through the practices, and he's really getting beat up, but they start making the cuts as the practices go on, but he does make the final cut for the team, and starts practicing with them, but he ends up close to the end of the springtime getting an injury that kind of puts him off. They kind of write him off as far as the football team goes. They take his playbook back, but he's determined, he made that team, he wants his spot. And so, long story short, he goes through all the recovery, recovers faster than he's supposed to, he gets back on the team, and he decides he's there, and he has no idea why, so it must be because of God, and he's got some kind of mission that he needs to do. So, as the year goes on, he invites everybody for a Bible study group, and he makes up these cards, and he hands out to all his teammates, and the day comes, and he's ready, he's in the room, he's got everything ready. Nobody shows up. So he gets kind of dejected, and he waits for a couple weeks, and he comes up with this new idea that it must not have been a Bible study group he was supposed to have, it's just a prayer meeting. So he does the same thing, he prints up all these cards, he passes them out to the people on his team. The day comes, and he's sitting in the room, and 15 minutes after the time goes by, and one guy sticks his head in the room. He says, "Hey, what's going on in here?" He said, "Oh, this is that prayer meeting I handed out cards for." The guy says, "Great." Closes his door and turns around and walks out. So he's not feeling good at that point, and it's getting towards the end of the football season. They've played some games, and he says, "God, you're really going to have to show me what it is you want me to do here. I'm running out of time." And so Christmas is coming up, and his grandpa just started working for the Gideon's International, who are the people who put Bibles in all the hotel rooms and that kind of stuff. And so he writes to his grandpa and he says, "Hey, can you get me a case of those Bibles? I need to hand them out to the whole team." And so his grandfather ends up footing the bill for the Bibles, and he sends them to USC. And Christmas Eve, he sneaks into the locker room, and he's typed up this letter that says, "The greatest gift that you can receive, God's Word." And he puts that letter in the front of every Bible, and he puts it in the lockers of everybody. And they're off for winter break, so a few days after Christmas, he comes back, and he hears everybody in the locker room, and he's kind of hiding outside, waiting to see what it's going to be. And as the more people get there, he opens up the door to see, hoping that everybody's going to be in a great mood, and they're flipping through these Bibles. Instead, he finds every Bible shredded in pieces on the floor or in a trash can, and he's crushed. He doesn't know what to do at that point. And so they go and they end up playing in a bowl game, and then they go into a break. And it turns out on break, one of the football players, the kicker, Mario, ends up dying. He gets killed, I forget how, but he gets killed, and they all go to his funeral. And on the top of his casket is that Bible with a red piece of paper in it, which is what he wrote his note on. And so he gets some comfort from that. Long story short, years down the road, he gets down at USC, and he and Pete Carroll brings him up to Seattle when he changes from USC coach to the head coach of the Seahawks. And he says, I want you to come up here with me. So he comes up. It's Seattle. It's raining all the time, so he's not really making any friends. So he finds this group, and it's called Young Life, which is basically a Christian group that reaches out to younger kids, and he decides he wants to get involved in that. And so he goes to a house there, and this was the leader of that group. And it turns out the guy's wife is the sister of the placeholder for the kicker that died. And he's also in that group. So this guy that he played football with at USC is in the same group with him, and they start talking. And that place kicker, or the placeholder, looked at him. He said, you remember those Bibles that somebody put in our lockers? And, he's trying to play it off because he doesn't know how this is going to go. And he says, yeah, I think I remember something like that. He goes, that's what actually brought me back. My whole life turned around. I wasn't following God, and that brought me back. And the way that happened is Mario had picked up his Bible, and he had never seen one before, didn't know how to read it. And we were getting ready to walk out, and he asked if anybody knew how to read this. Do you start at the front, or is there any rules to how you're supposed to go about it? And so he sat down with Mario and started teaching him the things that he learned when he was a kid, which brought both of them to Christ. And so even though he had no idea the effect he was having, all he had to do was do what he thought God was leading him to do. So long story short, God can use us anywhere as long as we're open to it. And so Paul kind of recognizes, getting back to my story, Paul recognizes that the world is going to put up these barriers, as Ben Malcolmson had with all of the I guess, fight that was against him with his team, not being interested in anything at all. So Paul recognizes this and the effect the world has on us, and he wrote in Romans 12:2, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Don't let the world tell you that there are some that are too far gone in their sin that they can't be saved, that the people in some neighborhood aren't worth your time, that they aren't interested anyways, that the drug addict isn't worth the effort because they're just going to go straight back to the needle. That inmate doesn't want to hear about God. He'll be right back to his usual antics as soon as he gets out. Or that big burly biker has no interest in God." These are all examples of people that Jesus would have sought out, but that the world has put stigmas around. Stigmas of shame, violence, and oversight that are meant to keep people of God away from the people firmly in Satan's grasp. Instead of embracing these stigmas, Jesus had a different message for us. Matthew 22:39 states, "And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Quick side note, that commandment first appears all the way back in Leviticus. So this should have been nothing new to the people he was talking to at the time. But as I said, the world does happen to all of us, even in Jesus' day. So back to it, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I love myself enough that when I really started taking God seriously, reading my Bible, and taking in sermons, I saw there were things in my life that needed to go. So if I love my neighbor the same as I love myself, I need to tell them what God has done for me and what he would like to do for them. And we can start that with just a simple smile or a hello, or handing out a blanket, or buying a meal, or in some other way impacting that life first, showing the people that we're trying to reach that we don't see them as the rest of the world does. We see an individual worthy of our respect and love and our time. This commandment, at its core, means that we should be kind, compassionate, and generous to others. There's another story that I heard this week, actually from a coworker of mine. And we weren't really on the topic. He just wanted to tell me how one day his life had changed forever. And so he was telling me this was probably 30 years ago, so he was a lot younger then, but he used to close down a bar with a couple of the other guys that he worked with. And when I say close down, I don't mean they waited till last call and they were gone. I mean, they had got in with this bartender real good, so they were able to stay after the bar closed and help him clean up, and they could continue drinking that whole time. So they closed this bar down the night before, which was about 4 o'clock in the morning by what he said, and he had to be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so he went home and he had something real quick to eat, and he put on a new pair of, new outfit, clothes, whatever you want to call it. And he gets in his car and he's driving on 465 in Indianapolis, and he falls asleep at the wheel. And he slams into the back of the car in front of him going about 70 miles an hour. And must have been a time when the cars were built a lot different, because they end up pulling off, and he gets out of the car and he's kind of staggering around, kind of looking at his car and looking at the other guys. And he looks at the other guy and he says, "So you want to call the police?" And the guy said no. He reaches in his pocket and he pulls out some money and he says, I want you to take this money. I want you to go to that McDonald's over there. I want you to get you a cup of coffee, and I want you to try to make it to work alive. And he said, but don't you want to call the police? He said, no, I want you to take that money. I want you to go in there and get a cup of coffee and make it to work alive. He gets back in his car and he drives off. And so that day, my coworker went home and he told his wife, he said, we got to stop this. We can't be drinking like this anymore. We can't be partying out all night. And she said, I'm not ready to do that. And he said, well, you're going to have to go. And so shortly after that, they got divorced, and his life really started to take a turn, and he's not in that position anymore. But all it took was that one guy, just kind of showing, the character that Christ would have. I'm not looking to get you in trouble. I want what's best for you. And it doesn't stop there. John 13:34, Jesus gives us a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, which sounds simple, but we must keep in mind this is not speaking of small talk at pitch-in and shaking hands before church. Jesus loved us with a sacrificial love, a love that produces a deep desire to serve others, a love that causes us to set aside rank and privilege and look at the needs of others, a love that drives us to do the dirty work that everyone else passes by. Matthew 25:35 and 36 states, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. All these are examples of things, simple things that we can do to love our neighbors and to open a dialogue with them. See if you follow me on this for a moment. It's kind of complicated even in my head, but it made sense at the end. John 15:5 says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. I think we would all agree that we would love to bear fruit for God. We know what he's done for us in our lives, and we would love to spread that joy and love to others. But how? Yes, indeed, how? In order to bear fruit, we must abide in Jesus and in Jesus' in love. John 15:9 through 12 says, as the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So Jesus gave us all that commandment, and we abide in him and in his love by keeping his commandment to love one another. And by loving one another, we're able to bear fruit for him and bring more of his children home. I'd like to share a story with you now, another story with you, that a pastor of mine told me in a sermon long ago. One day he was speaking with a member of his congregation before the service began, and one of the church board members approached him and said to him, Pastor, you need to see this. And he led the pastor over to a woman seated in the pews and said, Pastor, you have to do something. We cannot allow that in this house of God. The pastor admitted that the woman there was wearing a skirt that was a few inches too short and clothes that were altogether a little too tight. But the pastor smiled and he kind of nudged the guy on his elbow and he led him out to the lobby. And there he explained to that gentleman that he knew the story of this woman, that she was in fact a prostitute who had been coming the past couple of weeks. Her mother had put her on the street when she turned 13, and she had done anything she could to survive. She'd walked past the church many times, but a few weeks ago she was led to walk in. She'd asked the pastor many questions and was eager to get the answers. And the pastor asked the man, if we ask her to leave now, do you think she'll ever come back? This story is a great example to us that when we see others, we need to realize we don't know everything, and we cannot be quick to judge. God is working on people in all walks of life, and when he presents them to us, it's our job to love them first and feed them God's word and his teachings. This knowledge is what will begin to transform them from who they are into who God will lead them to be. How many of us can say we didn't need any transformation when we walked in those doors behind you? Jesus had an exceptional ability to see beyond the exterior and look past the blemishes and imperfections, and to focus on the heart and the potential for transformation within. He reached out to the marginalized, the outcast, and those deemed unworthy by society. His ministry was a testament to unconditional love and acceptance. Welcoming those who were shunned and offering them hope and redemption. When we reflect on all our interactions with others, it is essential to ask ourselves if we are emulating this divine compassion. Are we quick to judge based on appearances, or do we strive to understand and empathize with the struggles and pains that others endure? Jesus saw the inherent worth in every individual, regardless of their past mistakes or current state. He believed in the possibility of renewal and the power to love to bring about change. In our own lives, we must challenge ourselves to adopt this perspective instead of dismissing those who don't meet our arbitrary standards. We should seek to understand their stories and extend a hand of kindness and support. It is through such acts of love that we can truly live out the teachings of Christ and make a meaningful impact in the lives of others. Furthermore, recognizing our own imperfections and the grace we have received can help us to be more compassionate and forgiving towards others. We are all flawed and in need of mercy, and acknowledging this can foster a sense of humility and empathy. By seeing people through the eyes of Jesus, we can cultivate a community of acceptance and love where everyone is valued and cherished. In closing, my experience in the produce section serves as a powerful metaphor for how we view and treat those around us. Let us strive to see beyond the superficial and embrace the broken and bruised with the same love and compassion that Jesus demonstrated. By doing so, we can spread the message of the gospel more effectively and create a more loving world. For in the eyes of Jesus, every person is precious and worthy of love and salvation. And I'd like to encourage each of you in this coming week to set aside those stigmas that you might have, or the reluctance that you might have as you experience the world, and just take in and realize that God has put those people before you for a reason. And you may not be comfortable with it, but God's already been out there doing the work. You just have to take that step. That's it.